Olivia, we're ending your employment. Effective immediately. The words hit like cold steel. No greeting. No small talk. Just the CFO's niece across the table, delivering the cut. 8 months in the building and she sat where I'd sat for 12 years. Emily Parks. 30 years old. Designer heels. Bloodline privilege. Her uncle signed the checks. She signed my exit. You're not aligned with the company's new image, she continued. Smooth voice, practiced smile. You'll receive 3 months severance. HR will process the details. Valerie from HR slid a folder toward me. Termination papers. NDA reminder. Badge return form. The same template I had written into company policy. I looked at it. No expression. No protest. Signed my name in 3 places. Emily waited for something more. A crack. A plea. I gave her nothing. When the meeting ended, I walked the hallway I'd known for over a decade. Past glass walls and polished floors that still carried my reflection. Not one person met my eyes. In my office, sunlight caught the edge of my desk. Awards lined the wall: compliance excellence, 0 violations, flawless federal audits. All mine. All now irrelevant. I took a single box from the shelf. Packed the silver pen from my first promotion. A mug from Milan, gifted by a client I'd saved from an investigation. And from the locked bottom drawer a red USB drive. Small. Unassuming. The blueprint of the audit system I had built from scratch. Not stolen. Mine. Registered under my name before I ever worked here. A detail no one had bothered to notice. Voices in the hall. 2 junior analysts whispering about the change. Their eyes darted away when I stepped out. At the elevator, Emily appeared again. Her gaze landed on the USB in my hand. She didn't know what it was. Not yet. In the lobby, the receptionist's smile froze when she saw the box. Leaving us? She asked softly. Yes, I said. Nothing more. Outside, the morning air was sharp. Traffic moved in restless waves. I set the box in my passenger seat. Hands on the wheel, I let the silence stretch. No anger. No fear. Just the still clarity that comes when a door slams shut and you realize you were already halfway out. I glanced at the building one last time. The blinds in my office window still open. The desk I had kept immaculate now waiting for someone else's clutter. Endings aren't always loud. Sometimes they're the quiet scrape of a chair pushed back. The ink drying on paper you didn't choose to sign. But some endings are misread. They aren't closures. They're launch points. The USB caught the light as I picked it up. And in that reflection, I could already see the part they hadn't calculated. They thought they had removed me from the system. They didn't know I had built it. 12 years is a long time to build something. Long enough to watch 3 CEOs come and go. Long enough to see interns turn into department heads. I joined the company at 23. Fresh out of grad school, armed with an accounting degree and a stubborn streak. Back then, we occupied half a floor in a dated building near the river. No glass walls. No espresso machines. Just beige cubicles and a shared printer that broke twice a week. The compliance department was 2 people, me and my supervisor. By the end of my first year, I'd rewritten half of our audit protocols. By the end of the second, I was leading external reviews. I learned quickly that numbers don't lie, but people do. If you dig deep enough, patterns appear. Patterns that make or break companies. By my 4th year, I designed an internal audit system from scratch. It caught discrepancies in real time. Flagged unusual vendor activity before invoices were paid. When a major supplier was caught inflating costs, our early detection saved the company $8 million in penalties. The CEO at the time called me into his office. He handed me a silver pen engraved with my name and said, "You just paid for your salary 10 times over." That pen went into my box this morning. I became the face they showed during audits. The one who sat across from federal investigators without flinching. 3 times in my career, we faced inquiries that could have crippled us. 3 times, I navigated us through without a single fine. But nothing stays the same. 5 years ago, the board hired a new CFO, Richard Parks. Sharp suit, sharper smile, and a network built on family ties. Within months, his niece Emily started showing up at company events. No official role at first. Just present. 2 years ago, she appeared on payroll as a consultant. 6 months later, she was Director of Compliance. My title didn't change. But my authority did. It started with meetings I wasn't invited to. Project briefs sent to her instead of me, client dinners reassigned without explanation. I told myself it was temporary. I'd been indispensable for over a decade. They'd realize that soon enough. But the signs stacked up. My access to certain financial records was quietly reduced. Requests for budget increases were under review for months, only to be denied. When I presented updated risk assessments, Emily would smile and say, "Let's keep this high level, Olivia. No need to overwhelm the board." High level meant shallow. Shallow meant things could slip by unnoticed. 6 months ago, I watched her pitch an updated compliance system to the executive team. It was my system stripped down, rebranded, missing critical safeguards. She spoke like she'd built it herself. Richard nodded like it was the best idea he'd ever heard. Afterward, I asked her about the missing safeguards. "They're too rigid," she said. "Flexibility is the future. Besides, not every flagged item needs attention." That was the first time I realized she wasn't just inexperienced. She was selective. And in compliance, selective is dangerous. 3 months ago, my seat in the executive boardroom was moved. Not next to the CFO, but down the line. A small thing, but small things add up. I told myself I was still valuable. Still the one who could answer the hard questions when regulators came knocking. But maybe that was just pride talking. The truth? They'd already decided I didn't fit the picture. The new image was younger, more malleable. Less likely to ask why certain vendors no longer triggered reviews. Looking back, the end didn't start in that conference room this morning. It started the moment Richard Parks walked through the door. And I let myself believe that 12 years of results would outweigh 12 months of politics. I was wrong. In the rearview mirror of my car, the building shrank against the skyline. They thought they had written the final page. But the story had been mine from the beginning. And I still held the blueprint. 3 days after I left, my phone buzzed with a message from James in IT. "They're rolling out Emily's system live today. Thought you'd want to know." I didn't reply. But I remembered every gap in that stripped-down version. Every safeguard she'd removed in the name of flexibility. I still had access to certain industry portals. Some weren't tied to my corporate credentials accounts I'd created years ago when testing third-party integrations. So, I logged in. The company's vendor transactions now flowed through a simplified filter. One I knew could be bypassed with minimal effort. It wasn't a vulnerability. It was an open door. Within a week, anomalies started appearing in public filings. Minor discrepancies. Payments to vendors I'd never heard of. Amounts just under the threshold that would trigger a deeper review. Patterns. Always patterns. I cross-referenced vendor names against corporate registries. One was registered to an address that belonged to a vacant lot in Newark. Another listed a CEO whose LinkedIn profile was suspiciously blank except for a single connection: Richard Parks. That was sloppy. 2 more days, and I had a list of 6 vendors flagged as high risk in my original system, all quietly cleared under Emily's. 3 had corporate ties to shell companies. 2 shared phone numbers. 1 didn't even exist in the state business registry. I wasn't surprised. Selective compliance leaves shadows. And shadows hide people. One evening, I met with an old contact, Daniel Hart, a senior auditor for a government oversight agency. We'd worked together during a federal review years back. We met at a quiet wine bar. He ordered whiskey. I stuck with water. They've downgraded their compliance framework, I told him. Things that used to trigger audits are now passing through. Daniel leaned in. Any evidence? I slid a small folder across the table. Printouts of vendor transactions. Highlighted discrepancies. Registration data. This is enough to start an inquiry, he said. But you know what that means. It won't be quiet. I'm not asking for quiet. After that meeting, I went home and plugged in the red USB. The screen lit up with the interface I'd designed: the original audit system, fully intact. Encrypted logs. Historical vendor data. Everything I'd preserved before they began gutting it. I ran a comparative scan. The differences were glaring. Where my system had flagged 214 potential irregularities in the last quarter, Emily's logged only 37. Numbers don't lie. People just teach them to keep secrets. 2 weeks later, I received an anonymous tip in my personal email. No subject line. No signature, just a single sentence: check vendor Alpha North Consulting, you'll find what you're looking for. I dug. Alpha North had been incorporated 6 months earlier. Primary contact: Mark Harrison. Mark's sister was married to Richard Parks' brother. A neat circle. Too neat. Invoices from Alpha North matched internal project names. I recognized compliance training sessions that never happened. Payments totaling nearly $1.4 million in 5 months. Emily's system had flagged none of them. I sat back in my chair, the glow from the screen painting the room in pale blue. 12 years of building something bulletproof, and they'd torn it apart in less than 6 months. And now the holes weren't just technical. They were intentional. The question was why? Money, obviously. But not small-time skimming. This was systemic. Coordinated. That night, I printed everything. Dates. Vendor connections. Shell company registrations. I stored a copy on an encrypted drive. The rest went into a locked fireproof box in my closet. The next morning, I received another message from James. They're having issues. Emily's freaking out. Richard's in meetings all day. Thought you'd enjoy that. I didn't respond. But I did enjoy it. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about accuracy. About proving, beyond interpretation, that what I suspected was fact. Over the next month, I built a full map of the network. 32 vendors tied together through overlapping directors, shared addresses, or family relations. 23 had been flagged in my original system within the past 2 years. all now sailed through without question. The final piece came from a whistleblower in email from a junior compliance analyst still at the company. It was short. They'd been told not to flag anything above $50K if it's pre-approved by Emily. Hope this helps. It helped. In 12 years, I'd learned that fraud isn't always about greed. Sometimes it's about survival, protecting the wrong people at the expense of the right process. Emily thought removing me removed the risk. Richard thought family ties could shield them. They were both wrong. Because while they ran their game in the open, I had been building my own. And I was nearly ready to make my first move. When you know the structure, you know where to apply pressure. Richard and Emily thought they were architects, but they were just tenants living in a house I had built. The first step wasn't action. It was positioning. I reached out to an old acquaintance, Marcus Liu, CTO at Horizon Ledger, a fintech firm I'd met years ago during a joint industry panel. He respected precision. And he had been trying to expand Horizon's audit and compliance solutions into corporate contracts. We met at a cafe overlooking the park. He wore his usual navy suit, unbuttoned at the collar. "I've been hearing rumors about your exit," he said. "I figured you'd land somewhere quickly." "I'm not looking to land," I replied. "I'm looking to build. And I think Horizon is the place." He leaned forward. "What exactly are you building?" I opened my laptop, plugged in the red USB. Audit X, my original system, came alive on the screen. I walked him through the interface, the live flagging protocols, the anomaly detection that Emily had stripped out. By the end of my demo, Marcus was smiling. "You want us to license this?" "I want a partnership. Exclusive. We upgrade it, scale it, and position it as the gold standard. And when certain companies suddenly need a system that can pass regulatory inspection, Horizon will be the only place they can get it." He understood immediately. We agreed on terms within the week. Funding. Development resources. Full autonomy for me. While Horizon's engineers began integrating my framework, I turned my attention back to Richard and Emily. I didn't need to confront them. All I needed to do was remove their insulation. The data I'd collected was enough to spark an official inquiry, but going straight to the regulators would limit my control. Instead, I decided to introduce a little instability first. I contacted two of the company's largest clients quietly, discreetly. Both had compliance clauses in their contracts requiring third-party verification of vendor integrity. I didn't accuse anyone of fraud. I simply showed them anonymized case studies. Hypothetically, I said, if your vendor network looked like this, would you feel comfortable? Within a month, both clients commissioned independent reviews of their relationships with Richard's company. Reviews that would inevitably bump into the shell vendors. I knew the ripple effect that would follow. When big clients start asking questions, everyone else starts checking their own ledgers. Meanwhile, Horizon and I pushed Audit X 2.0 into beta. New machine learning modules. Automated document verification. Encryption that made tampering nearly impossible without detection. I also embedded one subtle feature, a pattern recognition protocol tuned to identify the very kind of vendor network Richard was using. It wasn't marketing. It was insurance. By the time the client reviews began causing discomfort in Richard's boardroom, I had another move ready. An anonymous packet, delivered to a journalist I trusted. Not a story. Just data. Transaction records. Vendor ties. Publicly verifiable links. Enough to make them curious, but not enough to print without deeper investigation. Journalists have their own instincts. Once you point them in the right direction, they find the rest. 3 weeks later, whispers began in the trade press. No names. Just articles about emerging vendor risk patterns and the dangers of selective compliance. But anyone in the industry who knew the details could make the connection. That was the beauty. Richard couldn't address it without confirming it. Internally, pressure was mounting. James sent me a message. Emily's stressed. Richard's snapping at everyone. They've started holding closed-door meetings almost every day. Perfect. The final stage was timing. Horizon had scheduled the official launch of Audit X 2.0 for the end of the quarter. I wanted Richard's company to be in crisis right as we went public. 2 weeks before launch, the oversight agency Daniel worked for announced random audits across multiple corporate sectors. I knew better. Nothing about it was random. Daniel called me. They're on the list. We'll be going in with full scope. Any advice? Just follow the process, I said. It'll lead you exactly where you need to go. Inside Richard's offices, panic would spread fast. An official audit meant every transaction for the past 2 years could be scrutinized. Every shell vendor, every backdated approval, every selective clearance, all suddenly visible under a federal microscope. And Emily's stripped-down system? It would fail those tests in hours. I didn't need to be there to watch. James kept me updated in real time. 2 analysts quit this morning. Emily's barely talking to anyone. Richard called an emergency board meeting. By the time Audit X 2.0 launched, their world was already burning. Horizon's press release went out with a simple tagline: the only compliance system that's passed every independent audit since inception. We didn't name Richard's company. We didn't have to. Within days, inquiries came in from their competitors. Some just wanted a quote. Others wanted an urgent implementation. 2 had just failed partial audits and needed to recover before full inspections hit. I signed every deal personally. When Horizon's numbers hit the industry news, I got a single email from Emily. No greeting. Did you do this? I didn't reply. Because it didn't matter whether she knew. What mattered was that she understood something now, that the game she thought she'd won was never hers to play. The beauty of a quiet counterattack is that by the time they realize what's happening, you're already too far ahead to stop. And I wasn't finished yet. The first cracks showed within 48 hours of the audit team's arrival. Daniel didn't need to tell me. James's updates painted the picture in real time. They started with vendor lists, his message read. By noon on day 1, they'd flagged 18. By the end of the day, 32. Emily looked pale. That number wasn't even half of what I'd mapped. But it was enough to trigger mandatory deep dive protocols. The next day, Richard's assistant called 3 emergency board meetings back to back. Members flew in from out of state. They weren't there to offer support, they were there to protect themselves. By the end of week 1, rumors had slipped past the office walls. A supplier quietly pulled their contract renewal. A financial blog ran a blind item about a prominent firm facing internal compliance turmoil. In an industry where trust is currency, even whispers can devalue you overnight. Horizon's phones rang constantly. Prospects wanted quotes. Clients wanted upgrades. Several mentioned industry chatter as the reason for calling. I didn't correct them. Chatter was fine. Chatter could do more damage than a headline. On the 10th day of the audit, my phone lit up with an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Olivia, it's Richard, the voice said, measured but fraying. We should talk. There are misunderstandings. I think we can work something out. Call me. I didn't. 2 hours later, another voicemail, this one from Emily. Look, whatever you think happened, it's not what it seems. We need help, please. Please. The word landed with a dull thud. 8 months ago, she replaced me without hesitation. Now she wanted me to save what she'd gutted. By week 2, the audit findings were formal enough to share with regulators. Vendor relationships lacked verification. Approval processes bypassed standard checks. Millions in payments to companies with no physical presence or traceable services. Daniel called that Friday night. They're in serious trouble. Findings this size usually go criminal. I didn't ask for details. I already knew. Saturday morning, James texted again. They're asking if you'd consult. Full pay, no restrictions. Board approved. I sent one line back, no interest. The following Monday, a business journal broke the first name story. Richard's company was under federal investigation for systemic compliance failures and potential fraudulent vendor activities. Stock price dropped 12 before noon. By close of market, down 20. That same day, Horizon signed 3 of their former clients. Each deal closed within hours. Each one cited urgent compliance needs in their contracts. Emily tried again midweek. Her email was longer this time. Olivia, I know we didn't start on the right foot. I know things happened that you disagree with. But you have the skills to help us through this. Whatever your terms are, name them. We'll meet them. I didn't reply. Some offers aren't meant to be accepted. The audit stretched into a 3rd week. Public statements from Richard's company grew thinner, more generic. Full cooperation with authorities. Committed to compliance excellence. Empty phrases for an audience that had already moved on. By now, the board had split into factions. Half wanted Richard gone immediately. The other half feared removing him mid-investigation would look like an admission of guilt. It didn't matter. The story had momentum now. A week before Horizon's first quarter close, Daniel called again. They're finished, he said simply. We found direct links between vendor payouts and personal accounts tied to Richard's family. It's over. That night, I stood at my apartment window, city lights stretching in every direction. Somewhere across town, Richard was drafting his resignation. Emily was rewriting her resume. Neither would mention my name in the version they told themselves. But they would know. The next morning, a courier delivered an envelope to my office at Horizon. Inside, a short letter from Richard. I underestimated you. That was my mistake. I read it once, folded it back into the envelope, and dropped it in the shred bin. By Friday, the federal investigation was public record. Charges were expected. Multiple executives had resigned. Compliance leadership was under review. And Audit X 2.0 had its best sales month yet. When Horizon's CEO toasted at our quarterly wrap-up, he raised his glass to seizing opportunity. I didn't toast. Opportunity wasn't given to me. It was taken back. That weekend, I walked past Richard's building. The company logo was still there, but the lights on the executive floor were off. A security guard leaned against the reception desk, scrolling his phone. I didn't go inside. I didn't need to. Some endings don't require you to stand in the rubble. It's enough to know the structure came down exactly as you predicted, quietly, methodically, and completely. And I was already looking ahead. 3 weeks after the investigation went public, Horizon closed its largest deal yet, a former flagship client of Richard's company. 5-year contract. No hesitation. Trust moves fast when it's already broken elsewhere. I didn't celebrate. No champagne. No speeches. The outcome was expected. From my office overlooking the river, the skyline looked cleaner than it ever had from my old desk. Different angle. Different distance. One morning, I found an envelope waiting for me. Inside a clipping, Richard Parks resigns amid ongoing investigation, and a note from Daniel. Consider it done. Emily vanished from the directory days later. No announcement. No farewell email. Erased as quietly as she'd been installed. James texted me once more. They're moving out of the top floor. Feels empty here. I didn't reply. Horizon CEO offered me a seat on the executive committee. Equity. Strategic control. I accepted, not for the title, but for the autonomy to build without interference. The investigation dragged on, its language clinical: systemic vendor manipulation, financial misconduct involving related parties. Blunt reality: they'd traded the company's foundation for personal gain. One rainy night, I passed a cafe near my old office. Through the glass, young analysts huddled over laptops, focused and eager. I wondered how many believed loyalty could shield them. Loyalty is a currency only valuable if the other side keeps the exchange. Back home, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and reviewed the next Audit X updates: faster scanning, stronger encryption. Not to outpace someone like Emily. To ensure no one could dismantle what I built again. Near midnight, an email from an unrecognized address appeared. 2 words: you won. I didn't answer. This was never about winning. It was about restoring balance. I took the red USB from my drawer, turned it in my hand. It no longer opened anything. Horizon Systems had moved far beyond it. But I kept it not as leverage, but as a reminder. The morning sun was just breaking over the river. Light caught the USB's edge, flashing briefly before fading. I set it down, closed the drawer slowly. Some victories don't need an audience. Some endings don't need applause. Sometimes the real revenge is simply walking forward, leaving them behind to count what's left. And that morning, I walked into my office at Horizon without looking back.